The wind howled like a wild animal across the frozen plains of Virilia. Snow whipped in every direction, stinging the exposed skin of anyone who dared leave the safety of the colony. Out here, far from Earth, humans had learned the hard way that nature did not forgive mistakes. Only those who respected it survived. Ethan tightened the straps on his survival suit and adjusted the oxygen regulator. He was on his way to repair the communications array, a critical device that connected the small colony to the orbiting satellite relay. Without it, the settlers would be isolated, unable to call for help if disaster struck. Ethan was a man of duty, careful and calm, and he took pride in keeping the colony running smoothly. The sky was dark, a gray canvas that threatened snow at any moment. Ethan had been tracking weather patterns for hours, and though the storm seemed to be on the edge of the colony, he knew it could change direction at any second. The cold cut through his gloves, numbing his fingers despite the thermal layers underneath. Every step was hard, the wind pushing against him like an invisible wall. As he trudged through the snow, Ethan's mind wandered to the small comforts of the colony. The warmth of the hydroponic greenhouse, the smell of freshly brewed protein meals, and the laughter of his fellow settlers in the common hall. Moments like these were rare on Virilia, where survival always came first. Ahead, the communications array loomed, a metal tower rising from the icy plain. Ethan's boots crunched in the snow as he climbed the small platform to inspect the generator. He worked quickly, checking the circuits and aligning the antenna panels. The wind was picking up, whipping the array back and forth, and Ethan knew he had only minutes before the storm would trap him out here. Then, it happened. A sharp gust tore across the plains, stronger than anything he had felt before. Snow and ice slammed into him like tiny daggers. He held onto the tower for balance, trying to stay upright, but the wind was merciless. He realized that even with his suit, he could not survive long in this storm without shelter. Panic flickered for a moment in his chest, but he pushed it down. There was one place nearby, a survival tent meant for emergency repairs or research missions. If he could make it there, he had a chance. Ethan fought through the blizzard, each step a battle. The snow was knee-deep now and the wind was relentless. Just when he thought he could go no further, he spotted a small flicker of light ahead. Relief washed over him. Someone had set up a tent here, its walls bulging against the wind. He ran toward it, teeth chattering, limbs heavy from cold and exhaustion. He reached the tent and yanked the zipper open, nearly collapsing inside. He was not alone. A woman sat huddled in the corner, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her eyes wide with surprise. She was strong and alert despite the storm outside, with sharp features and hair whipped into a wild halo by the wind. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice cautious but calm. "Ethan, from the colony," he gasped, shivering. I need to wait out the storm." The woman studied him for a moment. She nodded and moved slightly, making room for him. "I'm Lyra. I'm a biologist. You can stay, but you have to keep warm." Ethan nodded, grateful. He stepped inside and she helped him remove his gloves and helmet. The warmth of the small tent seeped into his frozen body, and he realized how close he had come to disaster. Lyra offered him a portion of her thermal blanket, and they huddled together, sharing the small space. For hours the storm raged outside. Inside the tent, the two humans sat close, speaking softly to keep their minds off the cold. Ethan learned that Lyra had been studying the strange flora that grew in the shallow valleys of Virilia. She had discovered hardy plants that survived even the harshest blizzards, using deep underground roots and special enzymes to survive the freezing temperatures. "You really can't survive here without respect for the planet," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "Virilia doesn't care if you live or die. You have to adapt or it will take everything from you." Ethan nodded, shivering but listening. "I know. That's why I keep the colony running. Without the communications and generators, everyone is at risk." They talked quietly, sharing stories of Earth, the colony, and the small victories that kept them going. The bond between them began subtly. Small gestures, instinctive care, and the warmth they shared in the freezing tent. Neither realized it yet, but a strange energy hummed in the air, something ancient and biological, something that Virilia itself seemed to recognize. The night passed slowly. The storm outside showed no sign of stopping. Yet inside the tent, Ethan felt a sense of calm. Lyra's presence was reassuring, her steady breathing and soft words a comfort. He realized that survival was not just about skill or equipment. It was also about trust, and in this moment he trusted her completely. As the hours dragged on, their conversation turned to lighter topics, memories of home, dreams for the future, and even the small humor found in their misadventures on Virelia. Ethan felt a strange sense of connection, as if he had known her longer than he actually had. Lyra seemed to feel the same, though neither understood why. At one point, Ethan accidentally brushed against Lyra while adjusting the blanket. They froze for a moment, the proximity sending an unfamiliar warmth through his body. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the small lantern light, and for the first time she felt something shift inside her. A sense of protection, of connection, of instinctive care surged up, strong and undeniable. Outside, the storm showed no mercy. The wind screamed and snow swirled in chaotic patterns, but inside the tent, the two humans survived, not just through equipment or training, but through mutual support. They huddled together, sharing warmth and strength, neither fully understanding the invisible bond that had begun to form between them. Hours turned into the faint glow of early morning. The storm had softened slightly, though the plains were still covered in deep snow. Ethan and Lyra stepped out carefully, their bodies stiff from the cold but their spirits unbroken. The storm had tested them, forced them into close quarters, and in doing so, had sparked something neither of them could explain. As they walked back toward the colony, Ethan glanced at Lyra. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lyra smiled, brushing snow from her coat. "We survived. That's what matters. The planet can be cruel, but we were stronger together. Neither knew it yet, but this night would mark the beginning of a connection far deeper than friendship. Something ancient, biological, and instinctive had awakened between them, a bond that would shape not just their relationship but the future of the colony itself." Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest, a subtle tug of something he could not name. Lyra felt it too, a silent promise of protection, care, and connection. Both would soon discover that survival had a way of forging bonds stronger than fear, stronger than distance, stronger than even the harshest storm. As the first light of Virelia's twin suns reflected off the icy plains, Ethan and Lyra returned to the colony, unaware that their lives and the lives of everyone around them were about to change forever. The frozen world had tested them, and in surviving it had made them more than just settlers. It had begun to make them mates in a way neither fully understood, though the planet itself seemed to know. And so humanity's resilience, its courage, and its capacity for connection had claimed another victory, one measured not by survival alone, but by the bonds that make survival meaningful. The colony of Virelia was quiet in the morning light, though beneath the surface everyone was working tirelessly. Buildings of metal and composite panels clung to the rocky plains, heated and insulated against the planet's brutal cold. Smoky chimneys released thin wisps of steam from the power generators, and workers moved quickly, bundled in thick thermal suits. Survival was a constant challenge, and every day brought its own dangers. Ethan and Lyra arrived back from the storm, their steps slow but steady. They were both tired, their muscles sore from huddling together in the survival tent, yet neither complained. In a way, the storm had been more than just a test of endurance. It had been the start of something neither of them fully understood. Inside the colony's main hall, the warmth hit them first. The air smelled faintly of heated metal and recycled oxygen, a scent that was oddly comforting after the icy plains outside. Other settlers glanced at them as they entered, some nodding in greeting. Life on Virelia was harsh, but it was also communal. Every person depended on others for survival, and teamwork was more than a virtue. It was a necessity. Lyra carefully peeled off the layers of snow-laden clothing and hung them to dry near the heaters. Ethan followed suit, noticing how their movements felt almost instinctively synchronized. He reached for a bench at the same time she did, their hands brushing. Neither spoke, but both felt a brief, inexplicable jolt, a warmth that lingered beyond the physical touch. Days passed, and the two began to notice subtle signs in each other. Ethan would instinctively scan the horizon for danger whenever Lyra was near, even if there was no immediate threat. Lyra noticed her pulse quickened whenever Ethan was in danger, her thoughts drawn toward him automatically. Neither spoke of it because neither fully understood what was happening. Meanwhile, the colony faced a pressing problem. During the storm, some of the main heating units had failed and several settlers had narrowly avoided frostbite. Without repairs, the colony's survival would be at risk. A team had to venture back into the plains to fix the units, and Ethan and Lyra were both selected for the mission. Their skills complemented each other, Ethan with his engineering knowledge, Lyra with her understanding of the terrain and environmental patterns. The morning of the mission, the wind was still harsh but manageable. Snow blanketed the plains, reflecting the weak light of Virelia's twin suns. Ethan double-checked his tools while Lyra mapped the route. The moment they set off, their movements were seamless, as if they had trained together for months rather than days. At first, the journey was routine. They trudged through the snow, using handheld sensors to locate the damaged heaters. But then a small crevasse appeared, hidden beneath a thin layer of snow. Ethan stopped suddenly, sensing the danger, and pulled Lyra back just in time. "That was close," she whispered, her eyes wide. Ethan shook his head, trying to hide the strange rush of emotion he felt. "Too close," he admitted, scanning the area carefully. He didn't understand why he felt such a strong need to protect her, but the feeling was undeniable. As they continued, more signs appeared. Lyra instinctively knew when Ethan was tired or overexerting himself, guiding him to rest before he collapsed. Ethan, in turn, found himself taking risks to ensure Lyra's safety, even when logic suggested caution. Their teamwork had become more than practical. It was instinctive, almost as if an invisible thread linked their actions. By mid-afternoon, they reached the first heating unit. The machinery had been battered by the storm and repair would be difficult. Ethan set to work immediately, opening panels and examining circuits. Lyra assisted, handing tools, analyzing structural weaknesses, and warning him of potential hazards. "Careful with that wire," she said, pointing to a frayed connection. "It could short and cause a chain reaction." Ethan nodded, impressed by her knowledge. "Good eye. I'd have missed that." As they worked side by side, the bond between them grew stronger, even if they didn't understand it. Ethan noticed that when he felt Lyra's attention on him, he could work faster, more efficiently. Lyra noticed that when Ethan's presence was near, her mind was calmer, more focused. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a shared energy that neither could explain. The repairs took hours, and by evening, the first heater roared to life. Warm air hissed into the frozen vents, a small victory against the planet's relentless cold. The two shared a quiet smile, pride and relief shining in their eyes. "Not bad," Lyra said softly. "Not bad at all," Ethan agreed, his tone almost reverent. They stood close for a moment, sharing the warmth of the heater, and Ethan felt a strange pull toward her, stronger than any he had ever felt for anyone. Lyra felt it too, a quiet certainty that this man was now connected to her in a way that went beyond friendship. The return journey was slower. Fatigue weighed heavily and the cold began to seep back into their bones. Yet the invisible bond guided them. They instinctively found shelter when the wind gusted too fiercely, shared the last of their thermal rations, and even instinctively matched their pace to avoid overexertion. Back in the colony, the settlers noticed something unusual. Ethan and Lyra moved with a quiet coordination, a harmony that went beyond teamwork. Others whispered about it, noticing how the two seemed attuned to each other's moods and actions. But Ethan and Lyra paid little attention. They were too focused on their shared mission, too aware of the subtle energy between them, even if they didn't yet understand it. That night, after a hot meal and a brief shower, they found themselves in the greenhouse checking the hydroponic systems. The lights of the small plants cast a soft glow across the room, and for the first time Ethan felt comfortable enough to speak about what had been happening. "Lyra, do you ever feel different around me?" he asked cautiously. Lyra paused, considering her words. She did feel different. Her instincts, emotions, even physical reactions were subtly altered when he was near. But she didn't want to frighten him. I think we work well together," she said carefully. "That's all." "Isn't it?" Ethan nodded, hiding the unease in his chest. Yes, I suppose." But both knew it was more than that. A quiet, invisible bond had begun to form, one neither could deny. It was subtle, manifesting in small touches, instinctive care, and shared awareness. Virelia, the frozen world, had sparked a connection between them, a connection that would grow stronger with time and survival. Over the next few days, the bond became more noticeable. Ethan found himself worrying when Lyra was out on solo research trips. Lyra noticed her thoughts constantly returned to him, her pulse quickening when he was in danger. Neither could explain it and neither spoke of it openly, but the signs were undeniable. The colony continued to face challenges. More heaters failed, and a nearby ice ridge threatened to collapse onto one of the supply tunnels. Yet Ethan and Lyra's growing connection made them stronger, more capable of responding to danger. They could anticipate each other's moves, cover each other in emergencies, and act as one in situations that would have overwhelmed others. One evening, after another long day of repairs and planning, the two sat together near the common hall's heater. They were tired, their suits still damp from the day's work, but the warmth of their shared presence was comforting. "You know," Lyra said quietly, "I've never felt this safe around anyone before." Ethan looked at her, caught off guard by her honesty. "I feel the same," he admitted softly. "I can't explain it, but I trust you completely, more than anyone." Lyra smiled faintly, understanding more than she could articulate. The bond was real, a deep connection that went beyond logic or explanation. Virelia had brought them together, not just through survival, but through something far older and more powerful than either of them could yet comprehend. Outside, the twin suns set behind icy peaks casting long shadows across the frozen plains. Inside the colony, warmth and light radiated from the small settlement, a beacon of human resilience. Ethan and Lyra, unaware of the full depth of their bond, had already begun to change each other. They were stronger together, their instincts, courage, and hearts quietly aligned by the trials of survival. And so, the seeds of a deep connection were planted, one that would grow stronger as the planet tested them further. Virelia was a harsh, unyielding world, but it had begun to recognize something in humanity: its courage, its adaptability, and its capacity for bonds that defied explanation. Ethan and Lyra were unaware that they were no longer just colleagues or friends. Something had awakened, a subtle, instinctive bond that would shape their lives, their decisions, and the future of the colony itself. As they left the greenhouse and returned to their quarters, the cold night air greeted them. But inside their hearts a warmth had been lit, one that would not fade with snow or wind. Humanity, in its quiet resilience, had claimed another victory. This time, not through machines or technology, but through connection, trust, and the courage to survive together. The frozen world of Virelia had tested them, and the test had revealed something extraordinary: that survival was never just about enduring the cold. It was about forming bonds that made survival worth everything. The frozen plains of Virelia stretched endlessly beneath a gray sky, winds slicing across the icy landscape like invisible knives. Even after weeks on the colony, the planet had not grown any less dangerous. For Ethan and Lyra, each day outside the protective walls reminded them how fragile human life could be in such a place. That morning, the colony issued a critical alert. One of the main heating units in the northern sector had failed completely, leaving several living quarters at risk of freezing. Temperatures outside were plummeting faster than anyone could have predicted, and the storm forecasts indicated another blizzard was moving in from the east. Ethan and Lyra were immediately tasked with repairing the units, accompanied by a small support team. As they stepped out into the bitter cold, Ethan adjusted his thermal mask and scanned the horizon. The twin suns were barely visible through the thick cloud cover, and the snow already swirled around their boots. Lyra's eyes were sharp, noting the subtle shifts in the wind, the glint of ice beneath the snow. "It's worse than yesterday," she said, her voice steady. "We need to be careful." Ethan nodded, feeling the familiar surge of protective instinct. He didn't know why, but he found himself watching her constantly, anticipating any hazard before she did. It was not something he consciously decided. It simply happened. The trek to the northern sector was slow. Deep snow made every step a struggle, and gusts threatened to knock them off balance. When the storm hit mid-journey, it came with a ferocity unlike anything they had faced before. Visibility dropped to a few feet, and the temperature plummeted dangerously. The team quickly huddled behind a large outcropping of ice, trying to shield themselves. "This is bad," one of the team members muttered. "We shouldn't be out here." Ethan looked at Lyra. She was scanning the horizon, calm but tense. "We have to reach the unit," he said firmly. "If we don't, people will freeze." Lyra nodded, knowing he was right. "Let's move carefully," she replied. Stick close, the blizzard was relentless. Snow whipped around them, biting through their suits. Every step was exhausting, every gust threatening to push them off the ice. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them shifted. A hidden crevasse yawned wide, masked by a thin layer of snow. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing Lyra's arm and pulling her back just in time. "Thank you," she gasped, her breath visible in the frigid air. He shook his head, words lost to the wind. Yet inside, a strange warmth spread, a mix of relief, concern, and something he couldn't name. The instinct to protect her had been stronger than anything he had felt before, almost as if the planet itself had decided she was important to him. The team moved cautiously, helping each other navigate the treacherous terrain. Every hazard tested their coordination, and every decision required split-second judgment. Ethan and Lyra moved together almost instinctively, instinctive gestures keeping each other safe. Lyra noticed that when Ethan was nearby, her thoughts sharpened, her reflexes faster. Ethan noticed he could anticipate her movements, responding before she even acted. The bond that had been subtle before was becoming undeniable. Hours later, they reached the damaged heating unit. Snow had buried part of it, and ice had frozen over critical components. Ethan knelt and began examining the machinery while Lyra assisted, clearing the ice and providing support. Their teamwork was flawless, each anticipating the other's needs without words. Suddenly, a section of ice above them cracked. Ethan's eyes widened as a shard fell directly toward Lyra. Without thinking, he lunged, pushing her out of the way and taking the impact on his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he didn't care. Lyra's eyes widened in shock as she realized what had just happened. "You're hurt," she exclaimed, kneeling beside him. "I'm fine," Ethan muttered, trying to mask the sharp pain, but inside, adrenaline and concern battled with discomfort. He couldn't bear the thought of her being harmed, and the instinct to protect her had almost thrown him to the ground. Lyra's hand brushed his arm, and he felt an electric surge of warmth, stronger than anything he had experienced. The incident changed something. Both were aware of it now, not just emotionally, but physically. The bond that had been forming quietly had activated fully. They could sense each other's presence more vividly, anticipate danger, and respond instinctively to protect one another. It was no longer subtle. It was undeniable. They worked tirelessly, repairing the heating unit despite the freezing wind. Ethan's shoulder throbbed with pain, but he ignored it, driven by a need to ensure Lyra's safety and complete the mission. Lyra, for her part, found herself calculating every step, every move with Ethan in mind, adjusting her actions to shield him without thinking. By nightfall, the unit roared to life, warm air rushing into the frozen vents. The team cheered, exhausted but relieved. Ethan and Lyra shared a quiet smile, the warmth of the repaired unit almost symbolic of the warmth between them. They were closer now than ever, bonded by survival, instinct, and shared experience. On the return journey, the blizzard intensified again. Visibility dropped and the cold became brutal. But the bond between them guided their actions. Ethan instinctively placed himself slightly ahead, breaking wind and snow for Lyra. Lyra adjusted her steps to match his, their movements synchronized as though they were a single unit. Every instinct, every thought seemed aligned. At one point, Lyra slipped on a patch of ice. Ethan caught her effortlessly, his arm wrapping around her to steady her. For a moment, they froze, breathing in the cold air, faces inches apart. Neither moved away. They didn't need to. The bond they shared was silent but powerful, filling them with strength, confidence, and a sense of belonging neither had experienced before. Finally, they reached the safety of the colony. Exhausted, frozen, but alive, they entered the warmth of the settlement. Settlers rushed to help the team, checking for injuries and distributing hot drinks. Ethan sat quietly, letting someone bandage his shoulder, while Lyra stayed close, her presence comforting in a way that made the pain bearable. Later that evening, after the team had rested, Ethan and Lyra found themselves alone in the greenhouse. The plants cast soft green light across the room, and for the first time since the storm, they could breathe and think. I don't know what's happening to us," Ethan admitted, voice low. "I feel connected to you in a way I can't explain. Like I need to protect you always." Lyra nodded, understanding him perfectly. "I feel it too," she said. "It's more than friendship. It's instinct, Something inside me tells me I need to stay close to make sure you're safe." They were silent for a long moment, the hum of the greenhouse filling the air. The bond was no longer a mystery. They both felt it clearly. It was instinctive, undeniable, and deeper than anything they had experienced. It was as if Viralia itself had chosen them to be connected, to face the planet's challenges together. In the days that followed, the bond continued to strengthen. They noticed each other's moods, physical states, and even thoughts more clearly. If one was tired, the other instinctively slowed down. If one sensed danger, the other reacted instantly. Their teamwork became legendary among the settlers, though no one fully understood why Ethan and Lyra were so perfectly in sync. The planet continued to challenge them. Snowstorms, icy crevasses, and mechanical failures tested their skills constantly. Yet with each challenge, the bond between Ethan and Lyra deepened. It was no longer just survival, it was connection, cooperation, and something almost sacred. One night, as the twin suns set behind the icy peaks, Ethan and Lyra huddled in a temporary shelter near a repair site. Outside, the wind howled and snow drifted across the frozen plains. Inside, they sat close together, sharing body heat and quiet conversation. "I've never felt this way before," Ethan said softly. "It's like I know you, even though we've only been together a short time." Lyra smiled faintly. "I feel the same. The planet, it's changed us in ways I don't understand. But I do know one thing. We're stronger together. Always." Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the thermal blanket. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do anything to protect Lyra, and she felt the same. The bond was no longer subtle. It was a force guiding them, connecting them, making them unstoppable. As the storm raged outside, Ethan and Lyra closed their eyes, trusting each other completely. Survival was no longer just about enduring Viralia's harsh environment. It was about facing it together, bonded in a way that would not be broken. And so humanity's resilience shone once again, not just through technology or skill, but through connection, instinct, and courage. The frozen world had tested them, and they had emerged stronger, together. The colony of Viralia had never been more tense. The previous storms had pushed the settlers to their limits, and every system now seemed fragile under the planet's unforgiving climate. The twin suns were weak behind a layer of thick clouds casting gray light over the icy plains. Even within the colony walls, the chill seemed to seep in, reminding everyone that survival was never guaranteed. Ethan and Lyra moved through the halls of the main compound, checking equipment and coordinating repair teams. Their bond, fully activated during the last blizzard, had made them almost instinctively synchronized. A glance, a gesture, a shift in posture, it was enough for each to know what the other was thinking. But while Lyra had grown aware of the true depth of the connection, Ethan remained unaware of its full meaning. He simply knew he felt stronger, braver, and more alive when she was near. The colony issued another alert. An icequake, a sudden shifting of massive ice formations in the northern mountains, was heading toward the settlement. If the quake reached the colony, it could collapse several buildings, trap settlers, and destroy critical systems. Panic rippled through the population. Though most tried to remain calm, Ethan immediately assessed the situation. "We need to evacuate the vulnerable sectors first," he said, pointing to the southern living quarters. Lyra was at his side, nodding. "I'll coordinate the rescue teams," she replied, scanning the settlement layout on a portable tablet. Their movements were seamless. No words wasted, every action calculated, every decision instinctively supported by the other. As they led a team through the icy corridors, the first tremors struck. The ground shook violently, sending small pieces of metal and dust falling from the ceilings. Settlers screamed, some panicked, but Ethan and Lyra moved calmly, guiding people to safety. Ethan felt the bond more strongly than ever. When a child froze in fear, he knew instantly where she was and what she needed. Without hesitation, he lifted the child into his arms and moved her to a safe area. Lyra, simultaneously aware of his actions, positioned herself to block debris that threatened the group. She felt the bond's pull, a deep, instinctive connection that guided her to protect him and those around him. The planet had forced them to rely on each other so many times that now their instincts were perfectly aligned. Once the initial evacuation was complete, the true test began. The quake's epicenter was closer than expected, and parts of the settlement were already crumbling. A supply tunnel had partially collapsed, trapping several settlers inside. Ethan and Lyra didn't hesitate. They led a small rescue team toward the tunnel, moving quickly through falling ice and cracking structures. Ethan noticed the ground shifting beneath his boots, each tremor stronger than the last. Yet he did not falter. Lyra's presence was a steady anchor, giving him confidence he couldn't fully explain. He adjusted his movements to mirror hers, instinctively covering blind spots while she anticipated every potential danger. It was as if their bond extended beyond emotion. It was a guiding force, a survival mechanism. Reaching the tunnel, they found the settlers huddled together, shivering and terrified. Ethan immediately began assessing the debris while Lyra comforted the group, keeping them calm. When a large ice slab threatened to fall, Ethan's quick reflexes saved Lyra from being struck. She grabbed his arm instinctively, pulling herself into safety, and for a brief moment, they locked eyes. "You're always putting yourself at risk," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with concern. Ethan shook his head, words failing him. "I can't." "Not when you're in danger," he admitted softly, the bond's influence making his feelings more obvious than he realized. For the first time, he began to question why he felt so compelled to protect her, why her presence gave him strength and purpose unlike anything else. Together, they coordinated the removal of debris and led the trapped settlers to safety. Each action was precise, efficient, and instinctively protective. The quake continued, shaking the settlement violently, but their bond kept them focused and calm. When a structural support gave way, Ethan and Lyra instinctively grabbed each other's hands, anchoring one another while guiding the group away from harm. After hours of rescue operations, the quake subsided, leaving the colony battered but intact. The settlers were exhausted yet alive thanks to the teamwork and courage of Ethan and Lyra. As the dust and ice settled, they looked at each other, realizing how seamlessly they had acted together. Lyra broke the silence. "Ethan, do you feel it?" she asked carefully. He frowned, uncertain. "Feel what?" "The bond," she said softly, her gaze steady. "It's not just instinct or luck. Something deeper, something that ties us together." Ethan considered her words. He knew something had changed, though he couldn't fully define it. He felt stronger, braver, more alert when she was near. He cared for her in ways that went beyond friendship, yet he did not understand why. I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know I can't imagine being out there without you." Lyra smiled faintly, relieved. "That's because we were meant to face this together. You're my mate, Ethan." The words struck him like a sudden gust of wind. "Mate." He stared at her, confusion and realization flickering across his face. He had heard the term before in Lyra's research, used to describe a bond that was deeper than friendship. A connection that paired compatible humans in life, instinctively drawn to protect and support one another. Yet he had never thought it could apply to him. "A mate?" he stammered, still trying to understand. Lyra nodded. "Yes, I didn't know how to tell you until now. The bond activated fully during the last storm, and it's clear. Our connection isn't just instinct or coincidence. It's biological, emotional, and permanent. You're my mate." Ethan's mind raced. He could feel it now more clearly than ever. The pull toward her, the desire to protect, the way his instincts aligned with hers. It was no longer subtle. The bond was real, undeniable, and powerful. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the colony's systems and the distant murmur of settlers filled the air. Ethan finally reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch against his frozen fingers. I think I understand," he said quietly. "I've never felt anything like this before. I can't explain it, but I know I'll always protect you. Always." Lyra's eyes glimmered with emotion. "And I'll always protect you too," she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. "The bond makes us stronger. Together we can survive anything this planet throws at us." The realization brought a sense of peace neither had experienced before. Ethan no longer questioned his instincts or emotions. They were real, natural, and meant to guide him. Lyra's presence was no longer just comforting. It was essential. The planet, the storms, and the challenges they had faced had forged something extraordinary between them. In the following days, the settlers noticed subtle changes. Ethan and Lyra moved together with an unspoken understanding, their actions perfectly synchronized. When a new storm approached, they prepared the colony in record time, anticipating each other's needs and protecting their team. Their bond became a beacon of hope and stability for everyone, a reminder of humanity's resilience in the face of adversity. Even in moments of rest, the bond was evident. Ethan and Lyra often found themselves sitting quietly together, sharing warmth, thoughts, or simple conversation. The connection went beyond words. It was a presence, a guiding force, and a reminder that they were no longer alone in the harsh world of Virelia. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the icy mountains, Ethan and Lyra stood on a small hill overlooking the colony. The cold wind whipped around them, but the warmth between them was undeniable. "I never imagined a place like this could bring something so powerful," Ethan said, his voice soft. Lyra smiled, resting her hand on his arm. "The planet is harsh, but it reveals strength, both in the environment and in us. We survived storms, earthquakes, and freezing cold one together. That's the true power of humanity, Ethan." He looked at her, feeling the bond in every fiber of his being. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not just about surviving. It's about connection, courage, and knowing we can face anything together." Lyra squeezed his hand gently. "And as mates, that bond will guide us through everything yet to come. Virelia tested us, and we emerged stronger, braver, and inseparable." The icy world around them was unforgiving, but within that harsh landscape, a new hope had been born. Humanity's strength was not just in technology or skill, but in bonds like this. Connections forged through survival, care, and instinct. Ethan and Lyra were no longer simply settlers or colleagues. They were mates linked by more than circumstance, and prepared to face whatever challenges awaited on Virelia. As night fell and the colony settled under protective lights, Ethan and Lyra stood together in quiet triumph. The bond was no longer subtle, it was real, powerful, and undeniable. The frozen world had tested them, and in doing so, had revealed something extraordinary. That survival was never only about enduring the cold, but about forming bonds that make life worth living. And in that moment, Ethan understood fully. Lyra was no longer just someone he cared for, she was his mate, his partner, his equal in courage and spirit. Together, they would lead humanity not only to survive, but to thrive. The winds of Virelia had calmed, but the frozen planet remained unforgiving. The colony was quiet now, with settlers recovering from the twin storms and icequake that had tested them in ways no human had expected. Yet in the heart of the settlement, a quiet strength had grown, not just in the buildings or machinery, but in the people themselves. And at the center of that strength stood Ethan and Lyra. Since the revelation of their bond, life had changed for both of them. Ethan had begun to understand fully the depth of their connection. He could anticipate her thoughts, read her emotions, and act almost instinctively to protect her. Lyra, in turn, felt more confident and capable than ever. Together, they were no longer just colleagues or friends. They were mates, a union forged by survival, instinct, and courage. One crisp morning, the colony faced a new challenge. Sensors detected a series of massive ice slides from the northern mountains, threatening to block critical supply routes and potentially isolate the settlement. The colony's engineers and biologists gathered in the central hall to plan a response. Ethan and Lyra stood at the front, naturally taking leadership. "We need to clear the routes quickly," Ethan said, pointing to the digital map. "If the ice slides block access, the colony could run out of supplies within days." Lyra added, "We'll need to coordinate the teams carefully. Safety is key, but efficiency is essential. Let's move in pairs, covering all sections of the path simultaneously." Their instructions were precise, and the teams listened intently. There was no doubt among the settlers. When Ethan and Lyra led, success was almost guaranteed. Their bond allowed them to communicate without words, anticipating each other's strategies and reacting seamlessly to obstacles. The journey to the northern routes was perilous. Snow and ice littered the paths, and smaller slides continued to fall unexpectedly. Ethan and Lyra led a team, clearing debris and directing settlers to safe areas. When a large slab of ice began to shift toward one of the teams, Ethan moved instantly, pulling Lyra to safety first and then guiding the others away. His instincts were unerring, his protective drive heightened by the bond. "You're always looking out for everyone," Lyra said quietly as they paused for a brief rest. "Even when I want to handle it myself." Ethan shook his head with a small smile. "It's not just about you or me. It's about all of us. I can't help it," I feel responsible for you and for everyone here. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes reflecting both admiration and understanding. She had felt the same pull since their first night in the storm tent. I feel the same, she admitted. And that makes us stronger. The bond, it's more than instinct, it's guiding us. As the day wore on, the ice slides continued. The team reached a particularly dangerous area, where a massive wall of ice threatened to fall onto the path. Ethan and Lyra immediately assessed the situation. Lyra analyzed the structure, predicting where weaknesses might allow safe removal. Ethan prepared the equipment ready to act at a moment's notice. Ready? Lyra asked. Ethan nodded. Together, they worked in perfect synchrony. Ethan stabilized the heavy tools while Lyra cut through critical points, guiding falling ice in safe directions. Every move was precise, every thought aligned. It was no longer teamwork. It was instinct, a seamless cooperation fueled by their bond. When a sudden tremor shook the ice wall, both reacted instantly. Ethan pushed Lyra to safety as the ice shifted, their hands brushing. A spark of warmth passed between them, reinforcing the bond further. They shared a brief unspoken glance, understanding that their lives were intertwined, their survival dependent on each other. By evening, the main supply routes were cleared. The colony's vehicles could pass again, and the settlers were safe. Exhausted but triumphant, Ethan and Lyra returned to the settlement, greeted by cheers and applause. The settlers recognized not only their skill and bravery, but also the unshakable connection that allowed them to face dangers no one else could. Later, in the quiet of the greenhouse, Ethan finally spoke what had been building in his heart. Lyra, I understand now, he said softly. The bond, it's not just instinct. It's more. I've never felt anything like this before. I want to be with you, protect you always. Lyra smiled, her eyes shining. I know, Ethan, I felt it from the start. You're my mate, and I trust you completely. Together, we're stronger than anything this world can throw at us. He took her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her skin against the cold of his gloves. The bond was more than emotional now. It was a connection of strength, courage, and trust. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to feel fully, to embrace what they had. The twin suns set behind the icy mountains, casting soft golden light across the colony. Settlers moved through the settlement, working quietly, but many stole glances at Ethan and Lyra. They were more than leaders. They were symbols of resilience, proof that humanity could survive even in the harshest conditions. In the following days, Ethan and Lyra's bond became a source of inspiration for the colony. They trained settlers, coordinated repairs, and prepared for future storms. Every challenge they faced together demonstrated not just human ingenuity, but human spirit, the willingness to protect, adapt, and persevere. One evening, as the settlers gathered for a communal meal, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side. The room was filled with warmth, laughter, and stories of the day's successes. A young settler approached Ethan hesitantly. Sir, how do you and Lyra work so well together? Ethan looked at Lyra and then smiled at the young settler. We trust each other, he said simply. We watch out for each other. And we know that together, we're stronger than any storm or challenge Virelia can throw at us. Lyra added, It's not just about survival. It's about connection, courage, and caring. When humans stand together, we can accomplish anything. The young settler nodded, inspired. Around the room, others whispered agreements. Ethan and Lyra's example had become more than personal. It was a lesson for everyone on Virelia. Humanity could thrive in even the most hostile environment if they worked together, protected each other, and trusted in their bonds. That night, Ethan and Lyra returned to the small living quarters they shared. Outside, the wind still howled across the frozen plains, but inside, the warmth was unshakable. They huddled close as they had during the first blizzard, but now with full awareness of what they were to each other. You know, Lyra said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. We survived storms, icequakes, and freezing plains together. And now we'll face whatever comes next, side by side. Ethan smiled, holding her close. Always, no matter what, we survive and thrive together. The bond that had begun in a simple survival tent had grown into something extraordinary. It guided them, strengthened them, and inspired everyone around them. It was a reminder that humanity's true power was not just in technology or knowledge, but in connection, courage, and heart. As the night deepened, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the colony bathed in twilight. Ethan and Lyra watched the icy landscape, feeling the quiet strength of their bond and the resilience of their fellow settlers. The frozen world of Virelia had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also shown them the extraordinary potential of humanity. Ethan squeezed Lyra's hand, feeling the warmth and certainty of the bond. "We've come a long way," he said quietly. Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the settlement. "And we're only just beginning. Humanity will thrive here, and together we'll lead the way." Outside, the wind blew, carrying the icy scent of Virelia across the plains. Inside, the warmth of connection, courage, and resilience glowed brightly. Ethan and Lyra, bonded by survival and instinct, had become more than mates. They were symbols of hope, leadership, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. And in that quiet moment, as the twin suns rose again on the horizon, the settlers of Virelia knew that no matter how harsh the world, humanity would endure. Through courage, cooperation, and bonds forged in adversity, they would not only survive, they would thrive. For Ethan and Lyra, for the colony, and for humanity itself, the frozen world of Virelia had become a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Together, they had not just survived, they had triumphed.